We acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, the gathering grounds of many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples whose footsteps have marked this land and whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. Hello and welcome back to Research Recasted, the Knowledge Mobilization podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey Johnston, and today we are joined by Soni Dasmohapatra. Soni Dasmohapatra is an assistant professor of arts and cultural management in the Faculty of Fine Arts and Communications. She is a passionate consultant, educator, and arts practitioner who facilitates somatic injury as pathways to explore leadership, self-discovery, creative research, and artistic emergence. She has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Alberta, a Master's in Public Administration from the University of Victoria, and a Certificate in Gender Studies and Human Rights from Oxford University in the UK. She is currently pursuing her doctorate of social sciences at Royal Roads University in Victoria. Well, hello, Soni. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to speak with you.
Yeah, I am too. So I kind of wanted to start off by just getting you to explain a little bit about the research that you do here at MacEwan.
So yeah, I'm an assistant professor in arts and culture management, and this is like now my second year, I think. Before this, I was sessional, and my research really stems as a lifelong sort of project, right? Because I think within the context of the faculty, in the context of the university, I really look at my research portfolio through an arts and cultural management lens, which includes, like, I would say 3 distinctive areas. So the first is sort of looking at cultural policy and cultural world building, interactions between public service and like sort of civic engagement, civic participation with citizens.
Okay.
And the second piece would be sort of like performing arts and understanding interactions and sort of like transformative change using arts in the performance sector. And the last piece is a lot about like looking at organizational structures, organizational behavior and development, and understanding how we can build more equitable futures and train and learn from collectively, collaboratively, the students in my class to build healthier ecosystems in the nonprofit arts sector specifically.
Oh, wow. So what inspired you to pursue research like this?
So I think arts-based research and creative research is such a fascinating type of research because it's iterative, it's based in lived experience, it's based on community relations, it's based on relationality and looking at the way that the world evolves, right? And I think that art and culture are humanity's sort of space for understanding each other and what is going on. And there's a real beauty in the way that people can interact with arts, culture, and heritage, right? And I think that especially when we look at that, there's a way that new emergencies can happen to understand the world as it is and how we can be different together. So for me, it started when I was like 4 years old. I learned dance in Edmonton. I'm a trained classical Indian Kathak dancer, and I did a lot of South Asian folk dances. And at that time in Edmonton, it's very vanilla, I would say, for lack of a better word. So I think that just having the connection to, my parents are from India, but they've lived here forever. So just having that connection to a type of identity, a type of cultural mooring was really important. And as I moved through that, I just understood the power of having a practice, right? And within the power of the practice comes the really interesting questions about belonging, inclusion, equity, identity. And I think Canada really focuses on multiculturalism. But at the same token, there's a lot of systems and policies in place that don't really maybe implement it or adhere to it. So that working through my life led me to sort of these kinds of questions. And so one of the other areas of research that I really want to focus on is when I'm doing archiving, for example, is really understanding the experience of the Asian diaspora, especially in Edmonton. Because, Asian people have been here for 100 years. We are the only province that has 2 big cities where the mayors are of Asian origin. No other province in Canada has this. Our first Muslim mayor, our first Muslim mayor in Calgary was Nahi Nanchi, and our governor general is also Muslim. So I think when we look at the diversity of Alberta as a whole, too, people don't have this knowledge, right? They're like, oh, Alberta's like the Wild West, cowboy country, oil and gas.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, it's like, how do we highlight these stories as part of this research for the past? Looking at the archives, looking at what was documented, what wasn't documented, looking at the present in terms of what is happening today with the different communities that have come and are established and are contributing economically, socially, and culturally, and to the future. Like, what does the future look like for diverse communities to come together and connect?
So kind of like speaking about that, you talked about how like, you know, we are the only province with Muslim like mayors and all of that. But like, so you kind of answered this a little bit, but I really want to kind of dig into what exactly, like, why is this research relevant today? Because you said we've had people of Asian descent in Edmonton for 100 years. So what makes it so relevant today to pursue it?
Mm-hmm. So I think, especially during COVID, there was a lot of emergences of different forms of movements, right? Like social justice movements, let's say. So Black Lives Matter, sort of the LGBTQ plus community coming out and saying that we need equal rights, right? So when we look at the social justice rights-based lens, which is where I look at my research from as well, I think that people don't recognize the kind of racism that still exists in society, right? And for myself, like working with Indigenous communities, having lived here, and looking at the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, I think that in itself was something that really struck me as, wow, like I need to understand how to work adjacent to the mainstream system. And the mainstream system sometimes does not allow for these conversations to happen. And that time during COVID was an eruption or a disruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as part of that inquiry, I think that as we move through the world now, there's intense global chaos, right? Like if we look at what's happening in the United States, if we look at what happens in the Middle East, anywhere actually. So what does that mean for us when we sit here? And how does my research like sort of understand that and give it space to breathe and space for people to come forward and talk about these issues that might not be safe, right? So for me, like the importance of right now is that collectively our nervous systems are in crises, right? Because I'm into somatics as well, like in terms of understanding healing and your embodied practice, right? As part of dance, like I said before.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're bombarded with so much polarization and so much uncertainty and so much rhetoric sometimes, there's a big divide. But how do we come back to each other in that relationality and that collaboration to understand that there doesn't need to be a divide? We can move forward equitably, we can create spaces of inclusion, and we can work together to really reimagine how we can work with that abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset.
Wow. So I know you had said like our nervous systems, and I've seen it written in your work about a collective nervous system for us. Could you kind of just explain a little bit about what that kind of entails?
Mm-hmm. So, like, I think that, right now there's a climate crisis. All these crises are happening, like I explained earlier. So, as humans, where do we sit in that, right? Like, I think that we tend to be Anthropocene, right? Like, we are the center of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And with that attitude comes ego. With capitalism comes consumerism. All these things that maybe seem good for growth, but maybe are sometimes destructive, right? So when we are understanding how we're interacting with each other, with ourselves, and with the earth as a whole, people don't teach us how to relax or how to be calm or how to rest or how to sit in joy. It's always like we're on or we're like going to the next thing. I feel like this is society as a whole. Like maybe some people have mastered it. I commend them. But as a whole, we're always taught to like perform or to create or to grow. And I think sometimes that's really not that's detrimental to our well-being. And that disrupts our nervous system, right? Like Gabor Mate, Resma Menikin, they are scholars who have talked about like how when you keep on going and you don't slow down and you don't take that pause, the trauma of your nervous system will increase. Furthermore, we all have intergenerational trauma, right? Like all of us who have come to this space and place, Amiskujiswaskaigan, that is our home in Edmonton. We all have journeys and stories that are good, but also hold some grief, perhaps. And we're not taught as a society how to deal with grief. So that escalates our nervous systems to be maybe not as balanced or we're not in tune with it. I mean, in academia, we think with our brain. Do we ever think with our body? And I think that disconnect also creates that kind of tension. So individually, we might have a tension, but then that tension expands to the collective. And then we keep going in this manner. Maybe that is not creating communities of care, that is not identifying where those points of tension are. As Canadians, we're polite. Maybe we don't want to deal in conflict, but in order to move to that next level, you have to deal with that tension that's occurring. So how do we do that respectfully? And how do we do that in a way that is a process and a ritual that can be exemplified in research?
Wow. I would have never thought of it like that. Like your thing about how we think with our brains and not our bodies. That's really interesting. So kind of on that note, I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the projects that you're working on, because I know that you just received a SHRC grant for a project you're working on, which is the Arts Impact Project. Would you can you tell us a little bit about that?
So this project is $2.5 million inside grant from SHRC, and it is an international project. So it's nationally across Canada, the US, the UK, and Australia.
Wow.
And Toronto Metropolitan University is the principal investigator. Actually, I'm doing my doctorate right now at Royal Roads University. And what I just spoke to you about in terms of like that whole piece about understanding body and mind and looking at rituals and ways of being. So I'm doing a comparative between Nehiwa or Cree epistemologies and Indian epistemologies and philosophies from where my ancestors are from as a comparative, looking at colonization. So the Hudson Bay is the East India Company and how that created the current systems that we live in, which are sometimes harmful, and then trying to imagine a different future through an arts impact assessment with that piece about like how do we come together and sit in this difficulty to move to the next level. Talking about things like oppression and racism and gender violence, perhaps, because, patriarchy is real. So all these things. So basically, the reason I'm sharing that is actually because my supervisor is Dr. Nana Alvarez at TMU, and she is the principal of this TAPE project, right? So what ended up happening was because I was working with her, she invited me to be a co-applicant, and we became partner, and that's why we're on this grant. So we were so thrilled when we got it because it's so exciting. And basically the premise of this whole research is to actually think about, it's a data-driven, arts is economic-driven. Like these are the discourses that are emerging, right? But at the same token, there's a recent article and research that was done by Future of Good. Artists are the least paid across Canada. Artists have the most delicate well-being indicator because their mental health is suffering. Their quality of life is not good. I just done some dance research as well with Can Dance National, as well as the Ontario Space and Mass Culture, and this is a national organization. And it was similar, like the quality of life of dancers is not up to par because of the way that arts funding is being cut, the way people are maybe moving away from going to performances post-COVID, or maybe arts is not as populated in those traditional senses as they were, right? So the thing is that like there's this discrepancy between arts as data, arts as economic growth, arts as understanding that space, and then what do artists need? What does the arts ecosystem need to thrive, to be sustainable, to be alive, again, to be abundant, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this project is going to look at those two spaces of quantitative and qualitative, and carry stories of the community, carry stories of artists, and carry stories of institutions to really understand how we can shift our frames to not it just being a corporate granting philanthropic model in arts. But there are other models that can emerge that can support arts to thrive and survive.
Oh, okay. So you're taking like the arts, you're saying how can we make them not only like a field of abundance for these artists, but also a way of economic growth, and you're looking at it through like the Cree and the Indian lens.
Yeah, so that's my research.
Okay.
So that one component within TAPE is what I will focus on.
Okay.
Because the thing is that like what I would like to really build out is an arts impact assessment in my PhD that I can use for my scholarship, that I can use for my teaching, that I can use at MacEwan and beyond. And that is a small segment of what will happen within TAPE, because TAPE has so many partners. There's like over 50 partners, right? So I think that it's such a big project. It's going to be interesting. But it's like, what are these mini prototypes of projects, of testing, of impact assessments that can emerge, that we can play with, that we can understand, that we can collaborate on, that we can implement, that we can see a different way? Because right now it's really difficult. Like I just heard a couple of things, like a couple of years ago, the Fringe was suffering in Edmonton, Grindstone Theater is suffering. Like so many local arts organizations are not thriving, right? And the traditional model of granting and funding or artists trying to build capacity sometimes are not working. So what are those gaps, and how do we address those to imagine something different, right? So I think those are the questions that are going to arise in TAPE. And because there is such a focus on the national arm, we can see what's happening geographically, like in the north, in BC, in the prairies, in Ontario, Quebec, and in the Maritimes, right? Because I think that also, depending on where you sit in Canada, the art sector is different, right? But as a whole, the art sector is so rich. And even just having international partners, like within the context of the US, all arts funding is being cut right now because of the administration, right? So this is alarming. So a lot of artists are taking up arms because the National Endowment Fund just released that all their funding got cut. So how do they survive, right? And it's a point of political sort of economic halt and sort of social justice movement in the States right now, I think, for that, right? People are talking about this. And even the UK and Australia, like I think Australia and Canada are similar in the way that we want to build Indigenous relations and other relations within that context because of the way that Australia and Canada were colonized, right? So even within the context of Indigenous arts, like what does that mean? How do we understand that? Like, is it part of like the Canadian experience or something different? Because Indigenous people will say sometimes that they're not Canadian, right? So I think all these complexities are really important to unpack and sort of discuss and have some ideas around and some ways moving forward. And I think the TAPE project provides that platform to be able to ask these questions and see where it can lead to.
Yeah. Wow. So a very big, very large scale endeavor, like research project that you're a part of. That's really cool. So kind of bringing it back into Edmonton and our community a little bit. I also know that here you host an annual like cultural bus tour in Mill Woods. What is that? Can you explain that for us?
Yeah. So, one of the courses that I teach in my program is called placemaking. And I'm interested in placemaking and placekeeping, right? So one of the things that emerged out of the annual Asian Heritage Month celebrations that happen in May is this opportunity to really look at Millwoods as a hub for the historic sort of imprint of Edmonton, right? So Councillor Karen Tang is the current councillor, city councillor, and she actually worked with us to make this happen into reality. So the bus tour is an opportunity to really understand the history of Papa's Chase First Nation and how Frank Oliver was not kind and sort of illegally took that land. And now to this day, that nation still not have status, right? So to understand that as part of placekeeping, to understand what that was. But then also to move into like the 70s when Millwoods was actually the first former urban plan community of Edmonton. So a lot of people settled there because that was one of the biggest things. And also a lot of immigrant communities have settled there in terms of people from all over the globe, whether they be from Asia, from Europe, from South America. So what you see in Millwoods is like really a big milieu of multiculturalism, lots of different people, lots of different histories, lots of different spaces. Because of the South Asian diaspora, so South Asia consists of India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and then secondary migration patterns, Malaysia, UK, etc. Like there's been a lot of different patterns, Guyana, West Indies. There's a lot of South Asian settlement that happened in Millwoods over the last 40 years. So we start the tour with talking about Sohn Singh Buller, who was one of the first South Asians to come to Canada and settle just in Alberta in 1905. And there's a little parkette in Millwoods that's named after him. So we go there and we talk about that history. And what's really interesting about his story is that he married Iphigenia Jones, who's part of the Shiloh community, the Black community that was here at that time. And their daughter, Judy Singh, is a famous jazz musician who went to MacEwan. And she was part of the Tommy Banks ensemble, right? So her granddaughter is actually making a film about her now, too. So it's really interesting how this ties back to MacEwan, right? But yeah, so talking about like that history of like that establishment that there's been South Asians here for 100 years, like I said before, right? But then the second level also is like, how do communities form, right? Like often you'll see like in different ways, like Fort Edmonton Park, for example, hosts the first mosque that was built in Canada. And the first mosque that was built in Canada was built in Alberta in the 1930s by Syrian and Lebanese Muslim families that had come at that time. And because they didn't have the infrastructure to build that mosque at that time, they actually worked with the Ukrainian community to build it. So then you'll see a little bit of Ukrainian infrastructure and architecture there too, right? So that kind of collaboration that happened, how many people know this story, right? And how many people know that the first mosque that was built in Canada was built in Edmonton? The Al Rashid Mosque, which is still here in the north side, right?
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to think about that. And the reason I bring that up is because when we go through this tour, this is what we talk about. We talk about the gurdwaras, which are the Sikh temples. We talk about the mandirs, which are the Hindu temples. We talk about all the arts and culture that the South Asian community has brought over the last 100 years to Edmonton. So 34th Avenue is known as Little India, perhaps, right? Because of all the Indian stuff. But now it's being sort of populated by Korean stores as well. So there's this shift that's happening as well when we look at migration patterns that are coming to Edmonton, right? So for me, having this bus tour is such an amazing space because people get on the bus, they're all excited. We give little packets, like gift packets of like Indian snacks and drinks, and people have fun and we share the tour. There's tons of questions, there's a lot of discussion. And, it's just like a tour of something that you wouldn't have thought had so much rich history to it, I think sometimes. Because when you're driving to Millwoods, you're like, oh, whatever, right? I don't know, but it's like there's so many things, there's so many stories, there's so many places, there's so many urban emergences, right, that happen. So So even our current mayor, Amarjit Zoe, he was part of a Punjabi theater group that was in Mill Woods when he came first, right? So lots of different stories that I think are really interesting that shape our city, that shape the way that we understand who is here today and how we're contributing in different ways, right? And because it is Asian Heritage Month, typically in May, we hold this tour and we hold one in the fall as well because of the kind of demand that we saw. People were interested in learning about it. So yeah, and we always had different people. It's really fun. And we often end with a space where we'll go eat collectively in a meal. So just right now, the last one that we did, there's a new Pakistani restaurant that just won 85 top 10 restaurant. Kosar Grill. It's on Gateway. It's so yummy. Please go check it out. A shout out to my friend Rabia who owns it. But it's really yum. So I mean, these things that are emerging are so important to showcase that, as Edmonton as a city is equivalent to any big city like Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal, in that way. Yeah.
I know, like, I lived in Millwoods for a few years, but I had no idea. I have like a little question in my notes saying like, why Millwoods specifically? But you answered that beautifully and all of that. I had no idea that there was such rich history in like a small community like Millwoods. It's fascinating.
And even, how I said about Karen Tang being the council, like she's so fascinating. Like her leadership has been great because she did a participatory budgeting project with the residents of Millwoods to sort of identify what they wanted to have as part of their community, as part of their infrastructure. So that project in itself was so good because it was engaging the residents of that community to make decisions about what they wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
And so that piece about placemaking, about cultural policy, about understanding the interface of municipal governments and sort of communities is so important. So that's part of my research as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like just from talking to you, community seems to be at the heart of everything. So I did want to ask, like, are there any other community partners or anyone else that you're working with here?
Yeah, so, I love what you said, community is at the heart, because I really think that like community-based research has evolved over the last 20 years. And MacEwan just had a community-based research conference that they hosted. It happens every 2 years. And it was such a huge, amazing opportunity to collaborate with people across Canada and understand what is happening in their communities. So as part of that, I'll just dive into a particular project that I had done for the conference. So the City of Edmonton Archives has a South Asian archive community that's been meeting for the past 2 years, and I'm on it. And again, it's like to really unearth in the archives, like, where do we see diversity of people's stories, right? And unfortunately, when I went to the archives, there is nothing. It's like all the stories that are embedded are very Eurocentric, right? And I joke to my kids, I'm like, if you took a time machine and you came back, you would see no traces of like Filipino, Chinese, South Asian. Like, there's nothing in the archives, right?
Wow.
So I was shocked too. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Right? And unfortunately, a lot of the older, like pre 1950 documentation is really racist, right? Because there was like a lot of fear, right? So I think that for me, that was something that was shocking. I'm like, wow, this is really fascinating. And that also made me think about like, how do we raise voices? So the community archivist, Jaja Young, she's a musician. She plays the harp and the Chinese harp as well. And Janine Koring is a Filipino dancer. So the three of us got together and we're like, okay, how can we talk about this progression of past, present, future, like what we want to see. We're intergenerational, like we're all different generations, born and raised in Edmonton, Asian women. So we thought, okay, let's get together and think about a project. So we thought about animating archives. And we wanted to actually host a site visit that the conference presenters had asked us to do, where we would actually use art as a form of expression to talk about what we didn't find in the archives and what we hope to find in the future. And Jordan Hahn, who is a local filmmaker and photographer, actually was the documentarian and documented our entire project. So basically what we did was we had a methodological process, arts-based research, where we went into the archives and we tried to find different, like, sort of, is this positive, is this negative, where are these stories? And then from there we created pieces of, like, I choreographed a dance. I do ceramics as well, so I had a little ceramic display about talking about the interaction of art and archives. And Jaja she composed a harp piece. Janine composed a dance piece with her brother who played live drums. And we all did spoken word. And we all had a digital story to talk about that past, present, and future.
Oh, wow.
So there's a little zine here. So it was really great. And we said exploring what we did not find, because we were like, okay, what did we not find and what do we want to know, right? So that project was really great because we had an opportunity to sort of like think about our methodology, think about how to create it in a way that it can be redone or reused by different people who want to sort of explore this kind of what is in the archives or what is not, right? So I think that for me, that community engagement is the community of voices that are not there, or the community of voices that are there. And the city of Edmonton, working with artists like Janine, are the people that I feel can bring these heavy topics in a way that is more of an inquiry, curiosity.
Yeah.
And the audience members that had come were from all over Canada, and some of them were from MacEwan as well. But they were just like, the feedback that we got was really great. And they were like, I've never seen this. I've never thought of this. So they themselves took this back to their places of where they work, perhaps to want to share this, because we did a little evaluation and we heard them say this, right? So I think it's about like, how do we understand memory as well? So my research also is like, when we talk about memory and we talk about location, what does that mean? And how do we give space for everybody's memories to be encapsulated in a way that is respectful and thoughtful? Another project that I just done recently too was a partnership between the Can Dance National Network, Brian Webb Dance, Mile Zero, and MacEwan. And Josh Languedoc. So basically, we wanted to have this opportunity working with Canada's National. They always have a network meeting, and they have never been to Edmonton since their inception. We're like, what? You've never been to Edmonton? You don't know about the dance ecosystem in Edmonton? So we invited them to Edmonton, and we hosted them, and we had a 3-day forum, and we created this book called Good Journey Book, which sort of led them to an experience of coming to Amiskwaciwâskahikan, understanding the Cree culture and territory and language of this place. And in the morning, we raised a teepee with Jacqueline Cardinal and her dad, Louis Cardinal, and he was the elder who spoke to us about Cree teachings. And then in the afternoon, I hosted a Indigenous wisdom circle with Indigenous dancers from across Edmonton. Danny Okima, who's at University of Alberta, presented. Cara Brown, who's at the Edmonton Arts Council, presented. Some other people. And we were prepping them because we were going to go to Enoch Cree Powwow on Saturday. So we took them to Enoch Cree Powwow. We hung out at the powwow all day. We just had that experience of being in that space. So Enoch Cree was also a great partner. And then on Sunday, we had a showcase because they're all presenters. So they're going to bring different dancers from different spaces to different. And it was just beautiful. Like, people in Edmonton showed up. They danced their hearts out. There was also a video audition piece. And it was a really great space to discuss and talk about like how vital and vibrant dance is in Alberta, right? So that was another project that just happened like a couple of weeks ago. So I feel like for me, it's always nice to have a team. It's always nice to be in community. It's always nice to build relationality, because that's when these kinds of research projects become richer and are spread in different ways, right?
Yeah. No, community I find is so important when you're looking at stuff, and especially the arts too, because you can't really have arts without a community
Yes.
behind it. Everyone kind of works together. It's very collaborative and everything. And from the sounds of it, your research is actually being taken and used in different places, like you were saying with the archives and what you didn't find. People had taken that. But I wanted to ask, like, what other ways do you see your research being applied, or like how is your research being applied?
I love that question. And we were talking about this as a closing for a Good Journey book project. Because when the participants left to go back to Vancouver, to Ontario, to Quebec, to the Maritimes, we didn't know what they took with them. Because the thing is that they were in the moment, they were experiencing something with us, right? But people wrote back and they're like, oh my God, they're like, I've learned so much. I'm going to apply this about what I heard to my next festival program, or I'm going to reach out to a community in this way. So just to hear that feedback without asking for that feedback was really powerful, right? So one of the things that we were talking about when we were closing this sort of project as part of the core team was like, when we talk about transformative change, maybe we don't know what's going to happen. Like one of the participants was like, I'm going to sit on the plane and I'm going to cry all the way home because that's how much it impacted me, right? So that piece about her getting so emotional, about her, crying to process, like to me, that is such a profound research outcome. But people might not see it that way because of the way academic, like, is really logical, is very set in a way of understanding an outcome. But to me, the fact that this particular participant experienced this and was sharing this with us, that's transformative to me, because there's something that happened in their soul, in their body, not necessarily in their mind, that caused them to think about their lives differently, right? So that behavior change, or that sort of shift or transformation of their whole being, is really profound. So I think that art and research have that impact to be able to shift something. Like, you are coming in a certain way, you are seeing things a certain way, you're understanding it from your worldview. There's a world building activity that happens with you in that time and space. And then all of a sudden something shifts and you are different than when you came, right? And I know if it's a good different or bad different or whatever that is, like maybe you don't have to label it, but there's something that happened that transformed, right?
Yeah. So you've seen this this transformation, and you've heard accounts of it. So like going forward and continuing on with this, what sort of impact do you see this having on future generations? Like you mentioned that you had kids. Like how would you want this research to impact them and their generation?
So one of the things that I'm trying to build as part of my doctorate, that I'm trying to understand, is a theory of change, and copyright at Soni Dasmohapatra, is a concept called regenerative equity. So I feel like regeneration theory is really big in Europe right now. Canada is sort of getting there, but they're not there yet. But it's regeneration, you need death for regeneration to happen. You need to understand, like I said, that relationship between human and more than human for regeneration to take root. You need community. You need to be in nature. You need to connect with people, even if they're polar opposites to you or if they're like-minded, right? So my hope is that people can continue to be okay with that, right? My daughter helped with animating archives. She was like, Mom, I'm BTS. She's 10 years old. So for her, it was a really eye-opening experience. Like, she was so fascinated with sort of the media aspect of it, with the photography, with the actual day and setting up the tech and helping me, Jaja, and Janine. Like, she was really, it was a lot to her to see that and to be part of it. And that she won't get in school, that kind of experience or exposure. And even my other two children, I have two boys. Every time I do something, I incorporate them into it. Like my son actually did my digital storytelling. So I think that for me, it's like, this generation, they're 16 to 10, they're going to use AI, they're going to use other technology. Their lives are so different than when I grew up, right? Or even just a generation under me. Even like what they're learning at school is not keeping up to how the world is changing. So I feel like if there is a way for them to know too that, all these things are happening rapidly, change is happening rapidly, but you can just come back to yourself. You can sit in peace. You can rest. You can be joyful. You can be in your body. You don't need to rush. I think those things in the research process are so important too. And how do you build a habit out of that? How do you build a ritual out of that? How do you understand that? So at the end of the day, your nervous system is not disrupted.
Yeah. Wow. Kind of going off of that, I just wanted to end this this episode by asking you, what sort of advice would you give to students, staff, faculty, anyone who may be listening to this podcast? It doesn't have to be like research specific, but just what sort of advice would you give to someone?
Yeah, I think that we live in such a great, amazing space right now. There's lots of opportunity for different people. There's an abundance. So just how do you tap into that abundance? How do you collaborate with people that you might not traditionally collaborate with? What does that look like in terms of relationality? And how do you really appreciate arts, culture, and heritage? Like how do you keep it going? Because, it's such a profound point in humanity. It's been here forever. And I think that's how change happens in terms of people coming together, people grieving, people loving, people being happy. So how do we keep that going in a way that is healthy and not destructive, and also creates communities of care? How do we create communities of care with each other? I think that there's so much things have happened since COVID and what's happening in the world. It's nice to be empathetic and kind. And how do we keep that going when it's really easy not to do that?
Yeah. Wow. It's beautiful. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming here and speaking with us today. It has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's all we have for today's episode of Research Recasted. If you want to support this podcast, you can visit Research Recasted on your favorite podcast platform to find new episodes every 2 weeks. Also, don't forget to check us out on Instagram at Research Recasted, where you can leave us a like, give us a follow, or send us any follow-up questions you have from today's episode. This has been Research Recasted, the Knowledge Mobilization Podcast, brought to you by the Faculty of Fine Arts and Communications and the Office of Research Services at MacEwan University.